My badge still worked when I came in that morning, last time it would, though I didn't know that yet. I was balancing a half-melted protein bar on my keyboard while fixing a code deployment no one even knew had broken. Our core algorithm, the one that landed us on the radar of that $500M acquisition, was hiccuping on the East Coast load balancers. And if I hadn't caught it, Derek would have blamed cloud latency in tomorrow's stand-up, like he always does when he doesn't understand something, which is most days. Meanwhile, I was 7 tabs deep in a debugging session, Slack pinging like a Vegas slot machine, when an intern, God bless his soul, came by with an iced latte I didn't order. Said Derek sent it. Said it was a thank you for all your help during the due diligence sprint. I nearly laughed so hard I snorted. The thank you came with a post-it note stuck to the plastic cup. Keep crushing it. Remember, no need to join the buyer call today. Confidential stuff. Smiling face with sunglasses, that's when I knew. See, the algorithm they were selling as our proprietary optimization engine wasn't ours. It was mine. Mine from back when I lived in a roach motel with a whiteboard and insomnia for roommates. Mine from before the Series B, before the beanbags, before Derek got veneers and a LinkedIn following. But technically, it belonged to a now-defunct LLC I formed back when I still believed in protecting my work. Something in me told me not to dissolve it when HR onboarded me into the company 4 years ago. I shoved the binder with those original filings in the bottom drawer of my desk and forgot about it for a while. Until this acquisition started moving. By the way, if you're still listening and wondering how this ends, don't forget to hit that little subscribe button and tap like. Seriously, most folks never do, but it helps more than you think. And yes, there's a team of us behind these stories. And no, none of us get Derek's iced lattes. Anyway, inside the building, no one cared how the engine worked, just that it spit out pretty charts with double-digit cost savings. Engineers respected me. Legal ignored me. Sales couldn't pronounce my last name. I wasn't on the leadership page, didn't make the sizzle reel for the buyer. I wasn't invited to the fancy dinners with the buyer's team, where they all wore matching quarter zips and toasted synergy like it was a rare vintage. But every line of code they were about to sell had my blood in it. Literal blood once, after I sliced my finger on a busted server rack and just kept typing. I knew every efficiency flag, every failover condition, every hard-coded secret they never scrubbed before sharing builds. I wasn't bitter, not really. You don't survive a decade in tech as a woman without learning to eat quiet and dignity like oatmeal. I had my pod, my team, my purpose. They left me alone mostly. They needed me too much to mess with me until they didn't. Because once that acquisition started getting real, the suits rolled in like a tide and Derek surfed it straight to the front. Suddenly, was the visionary behind our optimization stack. My Slack pings slowed. I was looped out of meetings I used to lead. Even my Jira tickets started mysteriously reassigning themselves to new names I didn't recognize. At first, I figured it was just noise. The chaos before the windfall. We'd all get bonuses, I'd take 2 weeks in Iceland, maybe finally buy a better chair. But then one morning, the DevOps lead asked me where a certain dependency came from. It was one I had custom built, deeply embedded in the core repo. Looks like it points to a private registry. Do you recognize this name? I did. It was the old LLC's package name, the one I used to upload protected builds during my consulting days. The hairs on my arms stood up like the air before a lightning strike. That night, I went home, dug through an old fireproof box in my closet, and found the articles of incorporation. And there it was, my name, my signature, and a neat little clause about proprietary software retention rights. I poured myself a cheap glass of red, logged into the LLC's admin panel, and changed the status from inactive to active. And just like that, my name came back to life. They had no idea. Yet, they announced the acquisition in the dumbest way possible, an all-hands meeting with cold Costco croissants and a projector that wouldn't connect to Derek's laptop. He stood there, jabbing at the HDMI cable like it had personally wronged him, while half the room scrolled Slack and the other half tried to remember if they'd updated their resumes lately. Then, like it was a TED talk, it wasn't. He finally got the slide deck going and declared with that used car salesman grin, "We've entered an exciting new chapter. We're being acquired by Vierx Global Solutions." Cue polite applause, a few oohs, and one guy near the back muttering, "So we're wearing ties now." The only real surprise came when Derek called it a $500 million valuation milestone, like he personally drove the stock price with his charisma and mediocre hair gel. But I sat there, chewing the inside of my cheek because I knew what Vierx wanted. It wasn't Derek. It wasn't our flimsy UI that looked like it was designed by someone who hated colors. It wasn't our marketing team's slogan, "Optimize beyond tomorrow," whatever the hell that meant. No, what they wanted, the crown jewel of the entire acquisition, was the optimization algorithm that let logistics companies save millions by cutting waste in real time. The thing I had built, alone, over 5 years. Not that anyone would say that out loud. "Let's keep things tight," Derek said at the end of the meeting, adjusting his cufflinks like he was auditioning to be a discount Bond villain. "Don't speculate. Don't reach out to anyone on LinkedIn. And if you're not part of the core deal team, stick to your lane. His eyes landed right on me when he said it. It was subtle, but not really. Stick to your lane. That phrase hit like a slap disguised as a handshake. I smiled, small, tight, professional, but something in me clicked, like a seatbelt locking before impact. After the meeting, everyone scattered to Slack channels and whispered coffee chats. I didn't follow. I went back to my desk, ignored the congratulatory emojis, and unlocked the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. It stuck a little. I hadn't opened it in years, and there it was. A plain manila folder, edges curled like dead leaves. Inside, a printed provisional patent draft. 5 years old, my name on the header, my LLC on the footer. Legalese written in the caffeine-fueled clarity of a woman with nothing to lose and too much to prove. The draft described the logic tree of the algorithm in painful detail. The same algorithm they were about to sell off like it was an old office chair no one wanted. I flipped through the pages, heart thudding. The clauses I'd written were basic, but airtight. If any derivative version of the algorithm was ever deployed commercially without my explicit licensing agreement, I retained the right to pursue enforcement through legal and federal means. At the time, it had felt dramatic, paranoid even, but now, it felt like a fuse I could light, not because I wanted to blow anything up, but because I was tired of watching men in blazers smile while stepping over my work. The kicker? That LLC still existed. I'd paid the $10 renewal fee last quarter out of habit, right after paying my parking tickets and renewing my Costco card. My hands were shaking a little, not from fear, from clarity. I wasn't going to stick to my lane. I was going to draw new ones, and I had the map. I found out I'd been cut out of the data room from a Slack message. Not even a real one. Just a permissions error when I tried to open the integration checklist we'd been building for weeks. Access denied. You do not have the required clearance to view this document. That was it. No ping. No warning. No, hey Ashley, heads up, we're locking you out of the project you bled into for half a decade. I blinked. Hit refresh. Tried again. Same message. So I got up and walked calmly to Derek's corner office, the one with the fake bonsai tree and a poster of an astronaut that said, "Think bigger." The door was cracked. Inside, he was leaned back in his Herman Miller throne, shoes off, feet up, laughing with one of the buyer's analysts on speakerphone. And yeah, she was helpful early on, but at this level, we need strategic minds, not coders. I didn't knock. I just pushed the door open. He jumped like I was the damn ghost of competence. "Hey, ye, Ashley," he drawled, covering the mic like I couldn't still hear the analyst's condescending chuckle. "We were just, what's up? You revoked my access." He gave me that practiced half smile, the one he used when explaining to interns why they should pretend his calendar conflicts were real. "Yeah, just temporary. Nothing personal. You know how these things go, need to know. Above your pay grade," he actually said it, out loud, in front of a witness. "Above your pay grade," I nodded just once. Slowly, and then I turned around and walked out without another word. Past the sales bros pretending to type. Past the HR manager who always wore cardigans like armor. Down the elevator, past the broken security badge scanner they never fixed. Out the front doors. To the gray parking lot haze that always smelled like burnt coffee and wet concrete. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I called Jordan, my patent attorney. Still had his number saved under police car light fire extinguisher in my phone. "Ashley Lang," he answered like he was already half spinning in his chair. "Damn, haven't heard from you since, wait, 2019? They're selling the algorithm." There was a beat of silence. Then he whistled low. "The one from the LLC? Yep. Dormant when we drafted the IP retention for?" "Uh-huh, the core module, that exact one. Tell me you kept the paperwork, every page, printed, signed, timestamped, sitting in a locked drawer." Jordan was already opening files on his end. I could hear the tapping. "This could get messy," he muttered. "You never transferred rights to the company?" "Nope. They onboarded me as an employee, not a contractor. And I never signed over any proprietary claims. Didn't even ask. Idiots." I let the word hang in the air. "They think I'm replaceable," I said, my voice flat. "They're betting I'll stay quiet so the deal can go through." "Well," Jordan said, "they're about to find out you're not a silent partner. You're the original architect, and legally, you still hold the keys." A breeze kicked up, tossing the ends of my coat like something out of a low-budget movie. The cold anger that had been simmering in my chest settled into something sharper, like the click of a safety being taken off. "They cut me out," I said, "so I'm cutting back in." Jordan chuckled. "Let's dust off the dragon then. You still have the LLC's login, just reset the password this morning. You want to send a formal licensing notice, or do we wait till they're sweating ink?" I glanced back at the building. Floor-ceiling windows, obnoxious startup decals. Derek's silhouette pacing with a coffee in hand like he invented caffeine. "We wait," I said. "They won't see it coming." Jordan's voice was calm, crisp. "Then I'll prep the filing." I hung up, slid my phone into my back pocket, and walked to my car. The sun was finally breaking through the clouds, throwing long shadows across the asphalt, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to melt anxiety and dumped the entire drawer of old paperwork onto my kitchen table. It looked like a tornado made of invoices. Tax forms and dead highlighters had hit it. Somewhere beneath that pile was my leverage. I worked methodically, old-school detective style, because if I was going to challenge a multimillion-dollar merger, I couldn't afford a single gap. I found everything: the incorporation certificate for my LLC, the provisional patent draft with a notary stamp, the Git commit logs showing my personal signature on the earliest algorithm branches, even an email thread between me and a former CTO thanking me for independently prototyping the module before integration. That line alone was gold. A single sentence that proved authorship before the company even existed in its current form. I organized everything into a neat binder labeled root access. Felt poetic. Then I reached out to Jordan again. He looped in a junior associate from his firm. Her name was Tasha. 28, sharp, with the kind of quiet fire that reminded me of myself 10 years ago. When I met her in the cafe across from the courthouse, she already had a legal pad covered in notes. I read the draft filings, she said, eyes bright. You built this thing solo before employment under a separate entity, and the company never required a formal IP transfer? Nope. Derek thought NDAs were good enough. She blinked. That's not how law works. I sipped my coffee. Derek doesn't do law, he does vibes. Tasha grinned. Then let's ruin his vibe. While she reviewed the paperwork, I went back to the office, not inside, just to the cafe across the street. I liked watching how people moved when they thought they were untouchable. Through the glass lobby, I could see Derek leading the board through some overproduced slide deck. He gestured too much, his jaw moving like a politician's, eyes scanning the room for approval. Few of the junior execs laughed too loud. The engineers didn't. I spotted my old teammate Nolan leaving the meeting early. He looked pissed. I texted him one word, coffee. 10 minutes later, he slid into the chair opposite me, still in his hoodie, dark circles under his eyes. He's presenting your slides, he said before I even asked. Word for word. And get this, he renamed the module from A-Lang Optimizer to D-Rex Engine. I nearly choked on my drink. D-Rex, like the dinosaur? Yeah, Nolan said flatly, big, dumb, and loud. For a second, we both just sat there, laughing quietly. It wasn't the happy kind. It was the exhausted kind, the kind that happens right before a storm hits. Then his face turned serious. Look, Ash, you didn't hear this from me, but the buyer's tech rep asked about repo access. Derek said it's all centralized now, but I checked the logs. You're still listed as the original owner. I frowned. You mean he hasn't revoked my keys? Either he doesn't know how, or he doesn't realize you still have superuser credentials. I sat back, letting that sink in. My code, my access, my LLC, every piece still linked to me in invisible ways. Nolan lowered his voice. I tried to tell him. I said, hey, you know she still holds the original repo keys, right? He waved me off, said, it's fine, I'm the admin now. I could picture it. The dismissive hand flick. Smug grin. He thought power came from titles. He never understood that real power sits quietly in permissions. Thanks, I said, and don't worry. I'm not going nuclear. He nodded, trusting me, though he probably shouldn't have. Later that afternoon, I met Tasha again at the firm. She'd already pulled the LLC's reinstatement records from the state database. It's active, she said, sliding a printout across the desk. Filed under your name, reactivated 3 weeks ago. That's your company, Ashley. And according to the filings, your LLC retains exclusive ownership and licensing rights to any derivative optimization engines, language you wrote yourself. Brilliant. Back then, I thought I was overprotective. Back then, you were smart. We worked in silence for a while. She drafted the initial licensing demand, but I told her not to send it yet. Timing mattered. I wanted the knife to twist exactly when it would cut deepest, right before signing. As I packed up, Tasha said, can I ask something? Shoot. Why not just let them buy it out? You get a payout, no bad blood. I smiled faintly, because this isn't about bad blood. It's about remembering who bled for the work. That night I went home, lit a candle, and read through every email, every log, every timestamp again, not for revenge, for precision. By midnight, I had the entire chain mapped out, dates, dependencies, digital fingerprints. I didn't need to shout or post or leak anything. All I had to do was wait, and let the paper trail speak louder than I ever could. It hit me around 2 a.m., sitting on my couch in sweatpants with the licensing demand draft open on my laptop and a bowl of cereal turning to paste beside me. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen like it was daring me to sign. Just a few clicks, a name, a time stamp. That's all it would take to toss a wrench into a $500 million machine. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I hesitated, not out of fear. I've lived off expired ramen and coded with one hand while icing tendinitis on the other. I've been broke, overlooked, and ghosted by recruiters who wanted culture fit instead of competence. No, this wasn't fear. This was the whisper of guilt, curling around the edges of my focus like fog. What if this tanks the deal? What happens to the rest of the team? Am I just being petty? I closed the laptop and stared at nothing. The room was quiet except for the hum of my ancient fridge and the occasional creak of the heating pipes, like the bones of the building were groaning under the weight of my indecision. Then the memory came, 2 years ago, 11:43 p.m. I was in the office alone again, hoodie on, hair in a messy bun, staring at a wall of error logs that made less sense the longer I looked. I had a half-eaten protein bar wedged between pages of handwritten equations, and my eyes felt like sandpaper. I remember glancing at the glass door and seeing Derek's reflection as he walked by outside. Suit jacket off, tie loose. Laughing with some guy in loafers I didn't recognize. I later found out they were at some industry mixer, translation, overpriced cocktails and empty promises. That night, I stayed until 3 a.m. That night, I found the fix that would eventually become the backbone of our logistics optimizer. That night, Derek posted a selfie with the caption, "Networking with visionaries, clinking glasses hash founder's life he wasn't in the trenches." He never was. And now he was standing in front of boards and buyers with slick hair and a script he stole from my notebooks, pretending he'd led the innovation team like he didn't once ask me if Python could be compiled into PowerPoint. No, this wasn't petty, this wasn't sabotage. This was reclamation. I reopened the laptop. The licensing draft stared back, patient as ever. I reviewed every line again. The clause Jordan and Tasha had added at my request. This licensing requirement does not prevent commercial acquisition or integration, provided original authorship is acknowledged and compensation negotiated. It wasn't a kill shot. It was leverage, a line in the sand, a polite legal throat clear that said, "You forgot something." I clicked to sign. The digital signature slid into place like a puzzle piece clicking home, and with that I crossed the line. I wasn't hiding in the background anymore. I wasn't asking to be remembered in a footnote. I wasn't shrinking so Derek could feel taller. The documents were saved, time-stamped, encrypted, and queued for delivery. I leaned back and exhaled, not the jittery kind of breath that comes from risk, but the kind you take when you finally stand up straighter after carrying something too long, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was just making sure the record finally had my name on it. Let the company live, let the deal go through. But let no one walk away thinking, Derek built the thing that kept them all afloat. He polished the hood ornament. I built the engine. And now, they'd have to pay for both. Derek was practically vibrating with smug when the press call went live. I watched from my apartment, laptop balanced on a pillow, sipping burnt coffee, as he fake laughed through softball questions from industry reporters who'd clearly just copy-pasted the company press kit into their articles. "Our proprietary optimization engine," he said, emphasizing the word "our" like he hadn't first heard it from someone explaining what an algorithm even was, "is a revolutionary leap in supply chain intelligence." I muted the audio and stared at his frozen face mid-gesture. He looked like a stock photo of a man pretending to have a thought. 24 hours to signing. That morning, Tasha had filed the licensing demand package with the Secretary of State, and Kersey copies went straight to the buyer's legal team. Everything clean, language polite, tone professional. But beneath the legalese, the message was simple. You can't buy what you don't have the right to use. They'd received it 36 minutes into Derek's media blitz. 38 minutes in, a lawyer on the buyer's team flagged the email. 42 minutes in, someone in their contract division went digging through their due diligence archive. At the 50-minute mark, a single-line email left the buyer's legal server and landed in Derek's inbox. Subject, urgent IP inquiry body. Please explain this patent filing by Miss Lang. No emojis, no signatures, just that. And somewhere, far away in a boardroom dressed like a bank vault, the energy shifted. Derek didn't know it yet, of course. At that moment, he was too busy taking a staged phone call for LinkedIn content while standing next to our logo like he just solved world hunger. But behind the scenes, the air had thinned. The first time I knew it was working came from Nolan. Just a simple ping on Slack. "Nolan, did you do something?" Legal is losing their minds and Derek's locked himself in his office. Me, define something. "Nolan, you filed something, didn't you?" Me, just reclaiming what's mine. "Nolan, holy hell." I closed Slack and let the stillness settle in. My hands were clammy, not from doubt, just from the weight of it. A 10-year battle fought silently, all boiling down to this precise moment, the iceberg finally surfacing, and God help me, it felt good. I wasn't celebrating, not yet. There were still too many unknowns. Would the buyer walk? Would the company implode? Would they try to pin the delay on me? Possibly. But for now, I couldn't move forward without acknowledging me. Not Derek, not D-Rex, not the boys' club that had locked me out and laughed while doing it. Me, Ashley Lang. They could spin whatever narrative they wanted in the press. But in the back channels, in the legal Zoom calls and redlined contracts, there was now a truth they couldn't ignore. I paced my living room, nerves jittery but controlled. Tasha was already fielding calls, deflecting questions, and sending copies of the timestamped documentation to anyone who needed it. "This isn't about halting the deal," she kept repeating, her voice calm and firm. "It's about ensuring proper licensing for IP developed prior to employment. Standard practice." She was good. Jordan had emailed too, just one line, "Welcome to the table." By late afternoon, the company group chat had gone radio silent. No more memes, no more countdowns to the champagne pop. Just quiet, the kind that means storm clouds are rolling in. I sat back on my couch, eyes half closed, the tension vibrating beneath my skin. This was the moment before the fuse hit powder, and I was finally holding the match. By morning, the champagne glasses had vanished from the conference room. The custom cupcakes with the company logo, ordered by marketing 3 weeks ago, sat unopened in the fridge, the frosting starting to melt under fluorescent light. And Derek. He was sweating through his shirt on a call labeled Internal Alignment Touchpoint, which is code for oh God, stall them. I knew because Nolan forwarded me the invite. Just FYI, he said. He's telling the board it's all under control. Sure enough, Derek was trying to bluff his way through the fire like a drunk magician fumbling the big reveal. I've spoken with counsel, he said, pacing in front of a whiteboard filled with buzzwords like leverage, synergy, and actionize. IP claim is a clerical misunderstanding. It's being resolved. Bull. Absolute bull. Meanwhile, the buyer's side had gone eerily quiet. No call-ins, no follow-ups. Their lawyers had initiated what they called a hold pending internal compliance review, which is merger speak for freeze everything until we're sure this isn't radioactive. Derek might have convinced the interns and middle managers that everything was fine, but he forgot one key thing. Lawyers don't do optimism, do documentation. So while he blustered, they combed through the fine print, and what they found was a timestamp. A small, innocuous little note buried in the originating commit history of the optimization engine. 3 years ago, a line of code signed off with a digital fingerprint tied directly to my LLC. One line in the file header, / licensed under A. Lang Optimization, LLC all rights reserved. Jordan and Tasha had flagged it in the original cease and desist packet, but seeing it independently confirmed by the buyer's technical auditors, that sealed it. I didn't hear about it from them. I heard it from our company's internal legal team. Specifically, a guy named Philip who had once cornered me at a holiday party to explain why blockchain could revolutionize human resources. We'd never really gotten along. He called around 10:13 a.m. Hi, Ashley. Philip here. We just had a few clarifying questions about some documentation you may have filed. I leaned back in my chair, pulled the blinds half closed, and let the morning sun stripe across my living room wall. I assume you've read the filing? Yes, but there may be. I own the rights, Philip. Check the filings. Silence. Okay, he said eventually, in that overly careful tone lawyers use when they realize they're standing on the wrong side of a drawbridge. I'll let the GC know, he added. You do that, I said, then I hung up. Later, Nolan sent another message. Nolan, Derek's trying to spin it like you overreached and it'll blow over. Me, you ever tell a car it doesn't need its engine? Nolan, lol. Should I start backing up files? Me, just back up your sanity. This is going to get loud. By lunchtime, the board had convened an emergency session. No one was smiling in the glass fishbowl of the executive suite. People moved like ghosts, fast, quiet, eyes down. Derek came out of the meeting looking like a man who'd bitten into a cupcake and found a screw inside. I watched the chaos unfold like it was a play I'd seen before, same act, different costumes. They'd built the whole pitch on my work, then stripped my name from the credits. Now that the spotlight had turned hot, they were scrambling to figure out how to turn it off. But I wasn't hiding anymore. Let them look. Let them dig. Every breadcrumb they followed led right back to me. And for once, I wasn't the one explaining myself. I was the answer. They called the emergency meeting at 3 p.m. sharp. CEO, Derek, internal counsel, a couple of board members who usually only emerged from their lairs for quarterly bonuses, and joining via Zoom from a minimalist office that screamed billable hour, the buyer's lead attorney. I wasn't invited, didn't need to be. Nolan, bless his chaotic neutral soul, had accidentally left me on a side thread where the meeting link and agenda were copy-pasted. I watched it unfold like an opera with bad lighting and no intermission. Derek opened, voice an octave too high, pretending everything was fine. Obviously, this is a bump in the road, he said, sweating into his collar. We've looked into the IP filing, and it's a minor oversight, a misunderstanding. The module was developed under our corporate umbrella. Engineering had open collaboration. It's fuzzy. The CEO, Martin, didn't blink. Fuzzy? Derek nodded so hard he looked like a bobblehead on a speed bump. Martin turned slowly to legal. Is it fuzzy? Philip, Mr. Blockchain Revolution himself, coughed and adjusted his glasses. We're reviewing all documentation submitted by Miss Lang's counsel, but there's substantial indication that her claim didn't get to finish. The buyer's attorney, a woman named Hartman with cheekbones sharp enough to file a restraining order, unmuted and held up a document to the camera like she was presenting exhibit in court. This, she said, is the original LLC patent draft, filed 5 years ago under Ashley Lang's entity, with language granting exclusive rights to any commercial deployment of the optimization logic. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her name, she continued, flipping pages, appears on every version of the source code we received. Every git commit, every dependency note. This wasn't an employee contribution. This was a foundational product that was never transferred. You cannot sell what you don't own. The room went silent, and then Derek, in true Derek fashion, threw engineering under the bus. Well, he stammered, that's the problem with open dev environments, things get muddy. You know, shared logins, collaborative pushes. Engineering should have clarified who touched what. Martin's eyes narrowed. You're saying this is Nolan's fault? I'm saying our team lacks structure. But this isn't about blame, it's about moving forward. Hartman raised a single brow. Unless this is resolved immediately, our legal team advises against signing. And just like that, the air went flat. They were 19 hours away from signing a $500 million deal, and the buyer just threatened to walk over me. They didn't know it, but I was on the other side of the wall, sitting cross-legged on my living room rug, watching Derek deflate like a beach ball with a slow leak. Let him squirm. Let Martin sweat through his tie. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was clinical. Cold, the same way you run tests on a failing script, identify the bug, document the failure, push the fix. In this case, the bug was Derek, and the fix, recognition, ownership, payment. It could keep the cupcakes. I wanted credit, and the check. Hartman closed her binder and ended her call with one line: reach out once the licensing rights are fully clarified. Until then, Vierks will pause all contractual progress. Click, Zoom window gone. Martin just stared at Derek, who was now visibly panicking. Fix it, the CEO muttered. Fix it, but there was nothing to fix. They'd built their kingdom on sand, and now the tide was in. Every line they tried to bury me under, I'd carved my name into it, and now the ink had dried. The deal didn't just stall. It froze like a body in space, suspended, breathless, with frost forming along the edges. No press release, no champagne, just a quietly issued update on the investor portal. Vierks Global has elected to pause acquisition proceedings pending further review. Inside the office, it landed like a power outage. 1 second, everyone's riding the euphoria of an exit. The next, they're squinting into darkness, wondering what went wrong. HR went on high alert. All hands meeting canceled. Rumors spun faster than the espresso machine. Some said the buyer found fraud. Others blamed supply chain exposure. Only a few knew the truth. Only a few knew it had a name. Mine. By noon, Derek's calendar had vanished from the shared server. A sterile line from HR popped up in company Slack. Derek Collins is stepping away from his role pending internal investigation. Stepping away, like it was his idea. Like he wasn't practically dragged out of his Herman Miller chair by a board that suddenly realized their visionary forgot to check who actually owned the product they were selling. The CEO, Martin, looked like a man halfway through a root canal without anesthetic. During an emergency legal review, he sat slumped in his chair, knuckles white against the edge of the table, as Philip Dry swallowed his pride and confirmed, without ambiguity, that the licensing rights to the optimization engine were held in full by Ashley Lang under her reactivated LLC. There was no workaround, no loophole, no friendly handshake or NDA that could erase that digital paper trail. And just like that, the empire they'd tried to sell off without me collapsed, not into rubble, but into reality. That night, after the dust settled, after I'd microwaved my sad little dinner and half-watched a documentary I didn't care about, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no emojis, no preamble, just a single line: would you be open to discussing direct licensing with you? It was from Hartman, Vierks' lead attorney. I stared at it for a second, then I smiled, small, tired, but real. No one else was copied, no CCs, no Derek, no Philip, no Martin, just me. The algorithm wasn't dead. The deal wasn't dead. They just had to go through the actual owner this time. I grabbed my laptop bag, the same one I'd used for years, frayed at the corners, patched once with duct tape after a TSA mishap. Slid my charger in, checked the folder one last time. I didn't need to rehearse. The documents spoke for themselves. As I stepped out of my apartment, the streetlight flickered overhead like it wasn't sure whether to buzz or go black. The air was crisp, quiet. For the first time in weeks, the weight pressing against my ribs was gone. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't vindication. It was something cleaner, something quieter: ownership, control, a return to what should have been mine all along. The company didn't collapse. The tech didn't disappear. The engine still ran, but now it was no longer in the hands of men who stole credit and smirked through lies. It belonged to the one who built it. Me. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.